I've got a Call of the Wild joke for you. What did Buck say to the tree? Bark! It's bad. I know. It's just bad. Welcome back, nerds. You like suspense? I like suspense. I like suspenders too, but we're not talking about suspenders. We're talking about suspense. What are the things that make us feel like really excited about what comes next? What comes next? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to happen? That's suspense. We're going to get into that today. All right. So last time we finished reading and discussing chapter 2, Call of the Wild, and we analyzed Buck's decisions and what they reveal about his transformation. Or you might say his meta what? Yeah, metamorphosis. What about his metamorphosis? What about this changing from one creature into another? He was a creature of rules and authority. You know, he had this authority over this kingdom of farmland, and all the animals obeyed him. And he believed in the high and mighty law. Well, we start seeing him losing some morals here in the last chapter. He starts thieving to survive. He starts doing what it takes, baring his teeth, doing whatever it takes to survive. Now, you might call Jack London a nature faker here. You might say, Mr. Faber, if Buck has morals, that means a deep belief about what right and wrong is. Like, how is that an animal? You know, one of my students, I'm not going to out who you are, but they told me that their dog the other day got really upset about something and pooped all over the carpet. Yeah, it was disgusting. Then she rolled in it, right? That's also really disgusting. And, you know, when they went to go clean up the poop, they noticed, there's not a whole lot of poop here, but there's a lot on her. Where'd the rest of the poop go? Oh, where did the rest of the dog's poop go? I wonder. Yes, that's right. It ate the poop. And then 10 minutes later, threw it up on mom's bed. Yes, barfed up poop. I know, you're like, Miss Faber, this is disgusting. I don't want to hear any of this. The point is, dogs don't have morals. If any dog had a moral, like, that would never happen. That was disgusting. No human being would ever, ever, ever do anything like that. It's nasty and naughty. Don't ever do that. Dogs don't know, okay? So here when Jack London is talking about Buck, like, his morals, right? His morals are disappearing. You know, you might say, what? Do dogs have morals? Are you faking a little bit? Maybe he is. Maybe he's not. It's up to you, okay? Let's look at something deeper. We go a step farther in this next chapter. We're going to be looking at suspense. All right, so today we're going to begin reading chapter 3, Call of the Wild. We're going to analyze how incidents of the chapter propel the action forward and what the incidents reveal about Buck and Spitz. Now, we're going to be looking at suspense for sure, because there's a lot of suspense in here. But we're also going to be looking at how do our characters develop, Spitz and Buck. They've had one run-in so far with Curly, this other dog that got basically eaten alive by the pack of dogs back in Dai. Um, and Spitz kept, it says he kept running out his scarlet tongue, or his, was it scarlet? Something about his tongue. Maybe it wasn't scarlet, but crimson or scarlet tongue. It said he kept running out his tongue like he was laughing at the incident. And, you know, Jack London is a really smart guy. He specifically describes the color of the tongue. And again, I don't know if it's crimson or scarlet. I think it's crimson. Crimson is a word to describe red. And that same word is often used to describe blood, the color of blood. And so while Spitz is watching Curly being eaten alive, screaming for life, he's running out his tongue. It means his tongue's like coming out like a dog's tongue comes out, and it's red. And that's an image, like he doesn't just say he's sticking out his tongue. He says he's running out his scarlet tongue. And that's supposed to make us think of the color of blood, right? And so in a way, we get this picture of Spitz, almost like Spitz is eating Curly alive. It's almost like he's partaking of it. It's almost like he's participating in it because there's blood coming out of his mouth. You know, it's almost reminiscent of like a vampire, you know, like eating blood, eating the life off of somebody. And so that tells us something about the character of Spitz. Buck's not okay with that, right? It talks about eternal hatred or undying hatred. So Buck and Spitz, you know, they're working very closely together on this sled, and you know it's not going to last well. It's not going to end well, okay? Doesn't last forever. The materials you'll need for today, you're going to need The Call of the Wild by Jack London. Oh, bonus. A bonus? You get a bonus today? Awesome. The secret bonus is hidden somewhere in here, okay? And we'll come to that. Make sure you watch the video all the way through so you get to the bonus, okay? Um, don't cheat either. Don't tell people where the bonus is if they didn't earn it. You earned it. All right. You're going to need The Call of the Wild by Jack London. Specifically, this is Call of the Wild. Katwa. Katwa is Call of the Wild. Page 25 to 32. Not all of page 32, just part of it. And then your blue notebook, page 32 and 33. There's a bonus page in there, but I'll tell you about that later. Let's get started on this chapter before much longer. It looks really interesting. It is on page 25. Pause the video if you need to get there. Page 25, and it's chapter 3. Okay, pause the video if you need to get there. All right, so we're here. Chapter 3. It's called The Dominant Primordial Beast. What a chapter title. I'll tell you what, Jack London, he knows how to write a chapter title. That sounds super interesting. Dominant means the one in charge, like fully in charge. So some kind of beast that's fully in charge, and it's not just a beast, it's a primordial beast. And we looked back in our vocabulary chart, this word primordial, and it means kind of like the very first beginning of something, or something that's been around since the beginning of time. So we're talking about almost like you get this idea of Thanos being primordial, right? He's kind of this being who's been around since the beginning of time to make sure everything stays in balance, and he's a very dominant character. So this is very similar, but we're talking about a beast here, not Thanos, okay? So go ahead and read with me. The dominant primordial beast. The dominant primordial beast was strong in buck, and under the fierce conditions of trail life it grew and grew. Yet it was a secret growth. His new-born cunning gave him poise and control. He was too busy adjusting himself to the new life to feel at ease, and not only did he not pick fights, but he avoided them whenever possible. A certain deliberateness, or on purposeness, it means he made choices very purposefully, he was intentional about it. A certain deliberateness characterized his attitude. He was not prone to rashness. Rashness means like losing your temper really fast. Like he wasn't prone to that. It means he wasn't doing it. It wasn't a weakness of his. He wasn't losing his temper. He was very in control of his temper. He was not prone to rashness and precipitate action. And in the bitter hatred between him and Spitz, he betrayed no impatience, shunned all offensive acts. So there's this bitter hatred between him and Spitz, and we see that he's giving no sign of it. Okay, he's holding on to it. He betrayed no impatience. It's not like, oh my gosh, I'm showing that I'm impatient. That never happened to him. He was very calm, very collected, and this primordial beast is brewing inside him. Paragraph 2. On the other hand, possibly because he divined in Buck a dangerous rival, Spitz never lost an opportunity of showing his teeth. He even went out of his way to bully Buck, striving constantly to start the fight, which could end only in the death of one or the other. Early in the trip, this might have taken place had it not been for an unwanted accident. At the end of this day, they made a bleak and miserable camp on the shore of Lake Labarge. Driving snow, a wind that cut like a white-hot knife, and darkness had forced them to grope for a camping place. They could hardly have fared worse. At their backs rose a perpendicular wall of rock, and Perrault and Francois were compelled to make their fire and spread their sleeping robes on the ice of the lake itself. The tent they had discarded at Dai in order to travel light. A few sticks of driftwood furnished them with a fire that thawed down through the ice and left them to eat supper in the dark. Now hold on. Hold on. Perrault, you dummy. Perrault's a dummy. I mean, look, we'll see in the rest of the book, but in my opinion, what kind of person decides to camp on a frozen river and then light a fire on top of it without a tent? I mean, they're sleeping. If you've ever seen a frozen lake, there's nothing. I mean, it's not like there are trees in the middle of the lake. It's like a giant blank sheet of paper. And when the wind gets going across those lakes, man, let me tell you, I'm from Michigan. It will knock you down. And it's icy and it's cold, and they don't have their tent. Why'd you leave your tent in Dai? I know it says that I know it says that they wanted to travel light. But if you're going to ditch something, don't ditch the tent, and don't build a fire on a frozen lake, because it's just going to melt through. My rant is over. Let's continue. Close in, under the sheltering rock, Buck made his nest. So snug and warm was it that he was loath to leave it. When Francois distributed the fish which he had first thawed over the fire. But when Buck finished his ration and returned, he found his nest occupied. A warning snarl told him that the trespasser was Spitz. Till now, Buck had avoided trouble with his enemy, but this was too much. The beast in him roared. He sprang upon Spitz with a fury which surprised them both, and Spitz particularly, for his whole experience with Buck had gone to teach him that his rival was an unusually timid dog, who managed to hold his own only because of his great weight and size. Francois was surprised too, and when they shot out in a tangle from the disrupted nest, and he divined the cause of the trouble. Ah! He cried to Buck. Give it to him, by gar! Give it to him, the dirty thief! Spitz was equally willing. He was crying with a sheer rage and eagerness as he circled back and forth, a chance to spring in. Buck was no less eager and no less cautious, as he likewise circled back and forth for the advantage. But it was then that the unexpected happened. The thing which projected their struggle for supremacy far into the future, past many a weary mile of trail and toil. Pause there. Word, homie. Vocabulary word. That's right. Okay, so we have some vocabulary words here we're going to look at from this section. I know some of these right here, these two right here, we didn't read these words, but it's important. I'll explain why we have these words here. But the first word we have is deliberate. And we can actually find this word at the very beginning in the first paragraph. It says a certain deliberateness characterized Buck's attitude. And this is the root word. I don't want you to fill out deliberateness. I just want you to fill out the word deliberate. And so you'll take some time to look that up. It's an adjective to describe something. But before you look that up, okay, you're going to run into a problem if you look up this word. Because this word, deliberate, is also a homograph. Not a homograph, a homograph, okay? Homograph. All right, so homograph. And this word right here, homograph, is made up of two words, or two, like a prefix here. So this is a prefix, homo, and then graph. Okay, so this word homo means the same. Same. Mr. Ferber writes the same as a Sesame Street puppet. Okay, same. Graph here means, writing. Mr. Ferber needs practice writing with a mouse. Right? Yes, writing. Mr. Ferber needs practice writing with a mouse. Same writing. Written the same. This word right here, deliberate, is written the exact same as a word deliberate. Deliberate and deliberate are totally different words. Okay? Deliberate and deliberate are two very different words. They're spelled the same, they're pronounced differently, and they have different meanings. So you'd get into trouble here because the homograph of deliberate is deliberate. So, deliberate. Deliberate means on purpose, intentionally. It means you've done something intentionally. Deliberate means to think about something very long and hard. Okay, just think. You're deliberating. Okay, so very different words. So we're going to look up the word deliberate. It's an adjective. Deliberate is a verb that means you're doing something, you're thinking, you're deliberating. Deliberate means you did something on purpose. So make sure you get the word deliberate in your vocabulary chart and fill it out appropriately. Don't accidentally fill out the homograph. So the homograph, this also goes in your vocabulary chart. It means same writing. It means two words that are written the same way, but they have different meanings. Another word that's similar is a homophone. Homophone, okay? Again, not a homophone, a homophone. Homophone. And homo, okay, means same. And I think in science you might see the word homogeneous. And homogeneous means things have been mixed up to where it's all equal and the same. You don't have oil at the bottom and water on top. It's been all shaken together and it's water and oil mixed all together. That's homogeneous. So a homophone, guess what phone means? Phonics, phonetic. Call me on my phone. You used to call me on my cell phone. That's a throwback song. This means the sound. Okay, sound. Call me on my phone. Call me on my sound, on my noisemaker. That's what you're saying. Phone. So, same sound. So these are words that sound the same, but maybe they're spelled differently, or maybe they're spelled differently, or they look different, but they're pronounced the same. Okay, so deliberate and deliberate are not homophones because they look the same, but they sound different. Deliberate, deliberate. They're not homophones. So look up the word homophone, fill that out as well. And then the last word we're going to look at is malingerer. Malingerer. I want you to do this word right here. And this goes back to a word that we saw in chapter 2. It's on page 22. You don't have to look at it. I'll just read it real quick. It's when Buck is trying to figure out how to get more food and he sees some dogs stealing bacon. And it says, Buck watched and learned. When he saw Pike, one of the new dogs, a clever malingerer and thief, slyly steal a slice of bacon when Pro's back was turned. Okay, so Pike, this dog, is introduced to us as a thief and a malingerer. What a malingerer is someone who fakes like they're hurt to get sympathy or to hide that they're really kind of dangerous. So, maybe this dog kind of looks all sad and acts humble, but really he's really smart and he's really gonna steal the bacon and eat more than all the rest of the dogs. I mean, he's clever at faking illness. Does that make sense? So that's what a malingerer is. And the reason we're looking at this word now is that we're going to come back to a moment where Jack London brings this word back up again to describe Pike. And you might be like, what? In the context of what we're about to read, this wouldn't make any sense. But you need to know what it means so that when he mentions Pike and he says Pike the malingerer, you're like, oh yeah, that's the dog that stole the stuff, okay? So finish up those those 4 words in your blue notebook at the very beginning in your vocabulary chart. Finish all 4 of those words. Pause the video right here. Come back when you're done. Oh, now you're all vocabularized. Good job. Well done. Now we're going to turn to our blue notebooks, page 32. Only page 32. Go ahead and turn to page 32 in your blue notebook. Pause if you need to get there. Okay, You're back. Good. You've got page 32. All right. So it says with a partner, read the first 6 paragraphs of chapter 3. You know, I read those to you, but what I'd like you to do is go back now, look at them again on your own, and really answer these 2 questions. Oh, there it is, page 32 and 33. Okay. Answer question 1 and answer question 2. And the questions are really, what do we learn about the primordial beast within Buck in the first paragraph? And what does Spitz do to finally provoke Buck to act? So provoke means to like intentionally cause someone to get angry, okay? Or to cause something to happen. So what does Spitz do that intentionally causes Buck to get cray-cray mode? That is a scientific term. Ask Miss LaRue, cray-cray mode, okay? Go ahead and answer those. Come back when you're ready. All right, you finished number 1 and number 2 in your notebook, and we are moving on to Call of the Wild, back into the book, page 28. Is that right? No, 26. What am I talking about, Mr. Faber? I don't know. Okay, page 26, right where we left off. It is the last line at the bottom of the page there. Pause the video and get to page 26, the very last line. Okay. You're on page 26, last line, here we go. An oath from Perrault, the resounding impact of a club upon a bony frame, and a shrill yelp of pain, heralded the breaking forth of pandemonium. Pandemonium means absolute, crazy, insane chaos. The camp was suddenly discovered to be alive with skulking furry forms, starving huskies. 4 or 5 score of them. A score is 20. So 4 or 5 times 20, about 100. Okay? 100 score, or 100. Who had scented the camp from some Indian village. They had crept in while Buck and Spitz were fighting, and when the 2 men sprang among them with scout clubs, they showed their teeth and fought back. Push pause. Okay, we're right in the middle of that paragraph. Look, first time I read this, I had to reread it like 3 times. Jack London did that on purpose. This is building suspense. You see Spitz and Buck about to fight, and then all of a sudden, at the beginning of that paragraph, an oath from Perrault. That means he's cussing. Okay, he dropped a cuss bomb. That's what boomers call it, cuss bombs. Don't forget. So Perrault drops a cuss bomb. There's the resounding impact of a club. So, boom, there's this curse from Perrault. You hear a club hit on a bony frame, and you're like, what? Why a club? From where? Why is Perrault swearing? Hit a bony frame. That means a bony skeleton. And a shrill yelp of pain. You're like, who did he hit? Who? Well, we can assume he hit. There's so much to read in between the lines. Confusion, right? We're like, what is going on here? A breaking forth of pandemonium. Crazy chaos. Jack London's doing this on purpose. It's supposed to be confusing the first time you read it. You're supposed to go back and go like, wait, what? Wait, what? Why do you think he's doing that here? You're smart. You're smart. You're right. Okay? You're right. It is because what he wants to do is have us experience what the character Buck experienced at that moment, which is like, what? Buck has no idea what's going on, nor does anyone else. But it says that there were huskies, which are types of like northern dogs. They look like wolves, but they're not wolves. They're dogs, but they're dogs that look like wolves. So huskies, there are about 80 or 100 of these bony, skinny dogs that scented them. They smelled Perrault and all his dogs and everything. Smelled them and came running. Okay, in the middle of the night, pitch black. 100 hungry dogs. Suspense. Okay, this is getting serious. So let's go back down to the middle of the paragraph where it sprang on them with stout clubs. They showed their teeth and fought back. They were crazed by the smell of food. Perrault found one with head buried in the grub box. That means food box. His club landed heavily on the gaunt ribs, and the grub box was capsized on the ground, dumped out. On the instant, a score of the famished brutes were scrambling for the bread and bacon. The clubs fell upon them unheeded. They yelped and howled under the rain of blows, but struggled none the less madly till the last crumb had been devoured. In the meantime, the astonished team dogs had burst out of their nests, only to be set upon by the fierce invaders. Never had Buck seen such dogs. It seemed as though their bones would burst through their skin. They were mere skeletons, draped loosely in draggled hides, with blazing eyes and slavered fangs. But the hunger madness made them terrifying, irresistible. There was no opposing them. The team dogs were swept back against the cliff at the first onset. Buck was beset by 3 huskies, and in a trice his head and shoulders were ripped and slashed. The din was frightful. Billy was crying as usual, Dave and Solex dripping blood from a score of wounds. They were fighting bravely, side by side. Joe was snapping like a demon. Once his teeth closed on the foreleg of a husky, and he crunched down through the bone. Pike, the Malingerer, that means the one who's always faking like he's sick. This is the one who stole the bacon originally. Pike, the Malingerer, leapt upon the crippled animal, breaking its neck with a quick dash of teeth and a jerk. Buck got a frothing adversary by the throat and was sprayed with blood when his teeth sank through the jugular. Jugular is this vein. It's a really thick vein that goes right here. This is where you feel your pulse, okay? It's an artery. I'm sorry, not a vein. It's an artery. And you feel your pulse bump, bump, bump. That's because the blood is pulsing through there. Your heart pumps it and it goes. And so the jugular is very dangerous if you get that cut. Very bad. And that's why animals, if you see them fighting, they usually go for the neck. It's because something about them, some instinct, they know if they can rip that jugular vein, you're going to bleed out like that. Bleed out real fast, and basically no hope for you. You can't stop the bleeding by putting your hand on it or anything. It's going to pump out. It's just squirting blood. Sorry to be too graphic here, but Jack London did it first. Okay, so let's read at the very top of the page. Sprayed with blood when his teeth sank through the jugular. The warm taste of it in his mouth goaded him to greater fierceness. He flung himself upon another, and at the same time felt teeth sink into his own throat. It was Spitz, treacherously attacking from the side. Treacherously, right? Betrayal. On our quiz, we had that thing about treachery. Okay, one of our vocabulary words. Perrault and Francois, having cleaned out their part of the camp, hurried to save their sled dogs. The wild wave of famished beasts rolled back before them, and Buck shook himself free. But it was only for a moment. The 2 men were compelled to run back and save the grub, upon which the huskies returned to attack on the team. Billy, terrified into bravery, sprang through the savage circle and fled away over the ice. Pike and Dub followed on his heels, with the rest of the team behind. As Buck drew himself together to spring after them, out of the trail of his eye he saw Spitz rush upon him with the evident intention of overthrowing him. Once off his feet and under that mass of huskies, there was no hope for him. But he braced himself and took the shock of Spitz's charge, then joined the flight out on the lake. Later, the 9 team dogs gathered together and sought shelter in the forest. Though unpursued, they were in a sorry plight. There was not one who was not wounded in 4 or 5 places, while some were wounded grievously. That means very badly. Dub was badly injured in a hind leg. Dolly, the last husky added to the team at Dyea, had a badly torn throat. Joe had lost an eye, while Billy, the good-natured, with an ear chewed and rent to ribbons, cried and whimpered throughout the night. At daybreak they limped warily back to camp, to find the marauders gone, and the two men in bad tempers. Fully half their grub supply was gone. The huskies had chewed through the sled lashings and canvas coverings. In fact, nothing, no matter how remotely eatable, had escaped them. They had eaten a pair of Perrault's moose hide moccasins, chunks out of the leather traces, and even 2 feet of lash from the end of Francois's whip. He broke from a mournful contemplation of it to look over his wounded dogs. "Ah, my friends," he said softly, "maybe it make you mad dog, those many bites. Maybe all mad dogs, sacre dame. What you think, eh, Perrault?" And we stop there. So, yeah. Here's some more text and blah, blah, blah. More work to do, more work to do. Yeah, boring. Yeah, so. Bonus? Yes, a bonus. All right, cool. You found the bonus. The secret bonus, I call it. Here it is. Page 30 in your blue notebook. All right? Which is totally random. That's why it's a bonus. Don't tell anybody. It's secret. Go to page 30. Let me go there too. Okay, so page 30 in your blue notebook. You should have this like filled in. Mine's blank because I don't do this work. Are you kidding me? That's why I'm a teacher. I make you do it. But you should have this filled out. And then at the bottom here should be all blank. What I'd like you to do in this blank spot, all this blank spot, you're going to write something, okay? You're going to write something here, and I'm going to give you a signature on a Bears ticket. All right? So you get a signature on a Bears ticket. Get this done. It is for a grade as well. So I'm going to take a grade on it and give you a little Bears ticket. So good job. What you're going to do is you're going to reread this section of text. You can read it here, or you can read it out of your book. Reread this. And we talked a long time ago, and it has been a long time ago now. We talked about like figurative language, or specifically sensory details or imagery. Imagery is like using the 5 senses to indicate, like to really put the reader there. Okay, things you see, smell, taste, touch, hear. See, smell, taste, touch, hear. Feel, touch. Touch and feel are the same. Anyway, so it's 5 senses. You get the point. What I'd like you to do is look over this paragraph, this section, and I'd like you to pick one line that you find is the most effective imagery, okay? And I want you to copy down the line. You can say, I find this line has the most effective imagery, and then you're going to copy down the line, or it doesn't even have to be a full sentence, just a line. Like maybe it's dripping blood from a score of wounds. You know, that's something that you can see, or maybe it's something you can feel. Or maybe it's another line in here. There's some really good ones in here. Jack London is using imagery here to really do something. What I'd like you to do is find a line, copy it into your blue notebook on page 30 at the bottom, and explain why you think that line is very effective. Okay? Why do you think that line is very effective for this moment of action? All right, do that. Pause the video until you get that done. You can pause it. Okay, let's look here at page 32 in our blue notebook, and we are going to address number 3. Numero 3. Okay, so number 3. It says, answer question number 3 on your split page notes handout with a partner. Yes, with a partner. I want you to discuss it, but what does Spitz do and why is this significant? Okay. Lazy answer. Let me give you the lazy answer and tell you you can't do this, okay? Spitz attacks Buck. That's lazy. Like, you can read that easily. But, like, what's the significance? When does he attack Buck? Okay? What does this tell us about Spitz? It's more than just he attacked Buck. It's like when he chose to attack Buck. Like, Think about the whole setting, the big setting, like what's really going on out there, what's really happening all around them, and why do you think he chooses that moment to go for Buck's throat? Okay, so think about that. What does that tell us about Spitz as a character? This guy, this is a dirty dog. I don't like this dog. So answer that. Pause the video until you're done writing down your answer and discussing with a friend. All right, we are going to continue reading here now that you're done answering on page 32. So we're going to go in the book to page 26, right where we left off. So they've just had a massive attack, and Francois says something interesting. You know, he says they get mad dog. Maybe it make you mad dog. He says to the dogs. Maybe it makes you a mad dog. All those bites. What's he talking about here? Mad dog bites? This is called rabies, okay? Rabies is a really strange disease. You can read about it. In fact, I highly recommend it. It's a really, really weird disease. It's almost like the disease has a mind of its own. You know where zombie movies, the idea of zombies come from? It's from rabies, okay? So what rabies does is an animal that's infected with rabies, its body becomes very, very like hijacked, almost like taken over by the disease. It gets into the brain and it makes the animal super aggressive and makes the animal want to bite other animals. So you want to bite other animals. So if it does bite another animal, guess what happens? The rabies is transferred to the next animal. So rabies is really strange. It almost makes the animal into a disease in itself. So it's not like the animal coughs and then gets another animal sick. It's like it becomes a syringe full of the disease and it runs and bites and injects the disease. It's very weird. So that's what they're worried about here. These wild dogs have come and attacked their group of dogs, and they think, uh-oh, mad dog is going to break out. So let's read what happens there on page 29, starting with the courier shook his head. The courier shook his head dubiously. With 400 miles of trail still between him and Dawson, that's a city, he could ill afford to have madness break out among his dogs. 2 hours of cursing and exertion got the harnesses into shape, and the wound-stiffened team was under way, struggling painfully over the hardest part of the trail they had yet encountered, and for that matter the hardest between them and Dawson. The 30-mile river was wide open. Its wild water defied the frost, and it was the eddies only, and in the quiet places, that the ice held at all. 6 days of exhausting toil were required to cover those 30 terrible miles, and terrible they were, for every foot of them was accomplished at the risk of life to dog and man. A dozen times Perrault, nosing the way, broke through the ice bridges, being saved by the long pole he carried, which he so held that it fell each time across the hole made by his body. So Perrault's running ahead to make sure everything's okay, and he's breaking through the ice and falling into the frozen river. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but that is a death sentence. If you're falling into water in the Arctic, it's like, done, you're dead. So this is a tough guy. But a cold snap was on, the thermometer registering 50 below zero. And each time he broke through, he was compelled, for very life, to build a fire and dry his garments. So you look over and over and over. He's falling through the ice. He's catching himself. Then they're getting out, stopping, building a fire. He's taking off his clothes. He's drying them in front of the fire. It's going to take a long time to get those clothes dry. They put him back on. He goes running ahead again, falls through the ice again, building up. They're doing this over and over and over in this miserable weather, okay? Next paragraph, last one at the bottom of 29. Let's pause for a second. Sorry, I had a cough attack. Okay, nothing daunted him. It was because nothing daunted him, nothing scared him or made him pause. It was because nothing daunted him that he had been chosen for government courier. That means a person who carries important packages for the government. He took all manner of risks, resolutely thrusting his little weazened face into the frost and struggling on from dim dawn to dark. He skirted the frowning shores on rim ice that bent and cracked underfoot, and on which they dared not halt. Once the sled broke through, with Dave and Buck, and they were half frozen and all but drowned by the time they were dragged out. The usual fire was necessary to save them. They were coated solidly with ice, and the two men kept them on the run around the fire, sweating and thawing, so close that they were singed by the flames. At another time, Spitz went through, dragging the whole team after him up to Buck, who strained backward with all his strength, his fore paws on the slippery edge, and the ice quivering and snapping all around. But behind him was Dave, likewise straining backwards, and behind the sled was Francois, pulling till his tendons cracked. Again the rim ice broke away before and behind, and there was no escape except up the cliff. Perrault scaled it by a miracle, while Francois prayed for just that miracle. And with every tong and sled lashing, and the last bit of every harness rove into a long rope, the dogs were hoisted one by one to the cliff crest. Francois came up last after the sled and load, so they faced either swimming, which is impossible, or they had to go up this cliff vertical. So they took the sled and took it all apart and tied it all up and loaded the dogs up and pulled them up by rope. Then came the search for a place to descend, which descent was ultimately made by the aid of rope, and night found them back on the river with a quarter of a mile to the day's credit. Oof, they spent all day long and they only went a quarter of a mile. Terrible. By the time they made Hootalinqua and good ice, Buck was played out. The rest of the dogs were in like condition, but Perrault, to make up lost time, pushed them late and early. The first day they covered 35 miles to the Big Salmon. The next day 35 more to the Little Salmon. The third day 40 miles, which brought them well up toward the Five Fingers. Buck's feet were not so compact and hard as the feet of the huskies. His had softened during the many generations since the day his last wild ancestor was tamed by a cave dweller or riverman. All day long he limped in agony, and camp once made, lay down like a dead dog. Hungry as he was, he would not move to receive his ration of fish, which Francois had to bring to him. Also, the dog driver rubbed Buck's feet for half an hour each night after supper, and sacrificed the tops of his own moccasins to make 4 moccasins for Buck. This was a great relief, and Buck caused even the weazened face of Perrault to twist itself into a grin one morning, when Francois forgot the moccasins, and Buck lay on his back, his 4 feet waving appealingly in the air, and refused to budge without them. Later his feet grew hard to the trail, and the worn-out footgear was thrown away. That's a pretty funny picture of Buck. Francois likes this dog. You can tell Francois is cutting up his own shoes to make shoes for Buck. And then one morning he forgot to put the shoes on Buck, and Buck just rolled over on his back and stuck his legs in the air, and he's like, please, please put my shoes on. So I know those of you who have dogs, you can relate to this. They get used to being spoiled. Back into the next paragraph. At the Pelly one morning, as they were harnessing up, Dolly, who had never been conspicuous for anything, went suddenly mad. She announced her condition by a long, heart-breaking wolf howl that sent every dog bristling with fear, then sprang straight for Buck. He had never seen a dog go mad, nor did he have any reason to fear madness. Yet he knew that here was horror, and fled away from it in panic. Straight away he raced, with Dolly panting and frothing, one leap behind. Nor could she gain on him, so great was his terror. Nor could he leave her, so great was her madness. He plunged through the wooded breast of the island, flew down to the lower end, crossed a back channel filled with rough ice to another island, gained a third island, curved back to the main river, and in desperation started to cross it. And all the time, though he did not look, he could hear her snarling just one leap behind. Francois called to him a quarter of a mile away, and he doubled back, still one leap ahead, gasping painfully for air, and putting all his faith in that Francois would save him. The dog driver held the axe poised in his hand, and as Buck shot past him, the axe crashed down upon Mad Dolly's head. Buck staggered over against the sled, exhausted, sobbing for breath, helpless. This was Spitz's opportunity. He sprang upon Buck, and twice his teeth sank into his unresisting foe and ripped and tore the flesh to the bone. Then Francois's lash descended, and Buck had the satisfaction of watching Spitz receive the worst whipping as yet administered to any of the team. "One devil dat Spitz," remarked Perrault. "Some damn day him kill dat Buck." "Dat Buck two devils," was Francois's rejoinder. "And all dat damn time I watch dat Buck, I know for sure. Listen, some damn fine day him get mad like hell, and den him chew dat Spitz all up and spit him out on the snow. Sure, I know." We're going to pause there. Can I summarize for you, please? Why they talk like this? Why they talk like this, man? They sound like, I'm trying to do a French accent. Let me level with you. I'm trying to sound French. I don't have a good French accent. My accent sounds sort of like Jamaican man. I don't know how to make it sound French. I'm sorry. But they're Frenchmen, okay? They're from Canada, French Canadians, okay? And the reason they talk like this is because English is not their first language, so you have to kind of translate what they're saying. So Perrault, the old man who's in charge, okay, the little weazened man who's in charge, he's mad at Spitz. He's like, "Spitz is gonna kill Buck." That's what he says. That devil, well, one devil is Spitz. He goes, "Spitz is one devil. He's a devil." And Francois, who really likes Buck, Francois's not in charge, but he's like the main helper. He's the muscle, right? He's the big guy in charge. Francois likes Buck, okay? So he put moccasins on Buck's feet. He's giving Buck 1.5 times the food of everybody else, giving extra food. And Francois says, "You think Spitz is a devil? Buck is 2 devils." Okay, he's like, "You don't need to worry about Buck." He's saying, "You watch, one day Buck's gonna tear up Spitz and leave him laying on the ground." He's like, "Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, Perrault. He's got this." So that's what's just happening there. Okay, let's get ready to move on to our workbook. All right, you know it's on page 32, number 4 at the very bottom. And we already talked about this just now, actually. I've got the coughs. I've got the madness. No, I don't. I don't have rabies. Unfortunately, I'd call in sick if I did, but I'm here. Okay, so number 4. How do Francois and Perrault's views about Buck and Spitz differ? They have a little bit different views on Buck and Spitz. Reread that last little conversation they have. And if you're still not sure, then rewatch the last section of this video. I'm drawing a sideways eyeball with eyelashes here. Don't know why. But finish number 4 and then move on. Pause the video here. Okay, you finished number 4. Let's look at number 5 as well. Don't do everything on this page, okay? Don't do this right now. All this stuff, don't do this yet. This is no, no, no. That means don't. Don't do this part yet. We're going to do it tomorrow. So number 5, how does the author use the incident of the wild dog attack to propel the action and the suspense in the text? Okay, I want you to really think about that. The dog attack was suspenseful, right? But we're not asking what was suspenseful about the dog attack. It was, why did Jack London, this is a totally made up story. All of this is completely made up. Why did Jack London create a dog attack there? Okay. What about that attack created some suspense? What's something we would be waiting for as a result of that dog attack? I think you know the answer. If you're not sure, ask around, but look at some of the action we just read about. How is that action a result of the dog attack? Okay, so I want you to answer that question right up here in the yellow number 5. All this stuff right here, answer this. Don't answer this today, and don't put an X over it. Just answer this guy and leave all this alone. Think about how the dog attack created another action sequence and some suspense for us. The expectation of something going to happen. Suspense. All right, think about it, write it down, then move on. Okay, you did it. In this lesson, you started reading and discussing Chapter 3, Call of the Wild. You analyzed how incidents in the chapter, specifically the incident of the dog attack, propelled the action forward and build suspense in the text. Let me just say, if you're not too sure, the answer is hydrophobia. Hydrophobia. If you're not sure what hydrophobia is, look it up. It doesn't mean fear. I mean, it means fear of water, but it means something more than just being afraid of water. It's a disease, hydrophobia. Okay, look at what disease causes hydrophobia. And that should be your answer to number 5. All right, good job. See you in the next lesson.